I just wanted to share some ideas and questions about to what extent our CHPC partnership with the Kekchi Estorania Isabel Presbytery has and could live out at least some of the Freeing Congregational Mission principles laid out by uh, the two co-authors in the last couple of weeks and also in the book. So there's a picture of the front cover of the book, and there is a picture of a worship service during the first visit of representatives of our partner presbytery to Kentuckiana. And there is Ramiro Kubkal, now deceased, now gone to be with the Lord, Hunter Farrell, who we heard from last week, and Gerardo Pope Each, and Makadia. And there's Ellen Sherby, and then over to the right is our own Eva Stimson. Main points of our historic covenant between this presbytery and Crescent Hill. One is that we pray for each other, and they have certainly done that, it appears, and we pray for a ministry or congregation each week in worship, and we share that information, and sometimes we bring special prayer requests or thanksgivings from our folks in the Estorania Presbytery. We try to share news and concerns and thanksgivings with each other. This particularly between folks who are sort of on the committee there that works with us, and from our own committee, the Guatemalan Connection. This has been sort of hit and miss. It's now, we used to have phone calls once a month, but now we tend to share Facebook Messenger messages or even Facebook Messenger audio video chats or share videos. And this has sort of been more between individuals lately. We used to have some more group chats, unscheduled usually. Okay, visit each other. We certainly had 3 visits from them. We've made 8 or 9 visits, but with the pandemic and then issues within our own congregation, that's come to a halt. So really since before the pandemic. And there were also some issues about immigration and visas maybe during the Trump administration. So it wasn't clear how easy it was going to be able to bring them. And of course, these visits are a little pricey, both financially and with our time and energy. And they take a lot of all the above. And so that's been a little tougher lately. We also committed to learning about each other's language, culture, theology, and spiritual practices. We had a Spanish class for a while. We started out with the shared project, and then we took a break from that. Then we started sending them money and sometimes providing some assistance during visits or even from afar for some projects like some church building projects or physical church building projects, and also for some theological education for some of the elders and pastors. And lately, we've just been sending them money, and more recently, we've had some changes, including Pastor Ramiro going to be with the Lord, and then lastly, engage in joint shared Bible study. Our Spanish language Bible class did this once or twice, and maybe with some other folks too. I should mention a couple other things that are important. Arguably, our partnership spun off our ELL, English Language Learners, often with other congregations, ministry, which is taking a break right now, but went on for a good, 12 years or so. And there may be some other things that we did like that. We've also had a men's group during a visit where we did some sharing, and that was revealing, and we had hoped that they might spin off on that. This took off from practices, I believe, within our own men's group. I tried to pull a couple things from the book to help us reflect back on. Late in the book, the authors shared some things from the Lilly Endowment about what they thought were practices of vital congregations. So exploring changing ministry contexts, and that certainly might mean exploring what this kind of partnership might look like with the our congregation being different than it was several years ago, including being smaller, and also in terms of I hate to say it, with the Guatemala Connection folks being, well, we're older, among other things, and that's brought new things. But there's also changes in our partners and in Guatemala, and of course, one of those was the going to be with the Lord or gracious God with our friend Ramiro. Okay, they talked about this clarity of vision, and we talked about this recently after worship in that hour long plus conversation. And occasionally we've talked about this as a single focus and identity. Do we want to be the build-a-bed, the church that thinks of itself and is thought of others? That's the build-a-bed church, or that's the gun violence prevention church, or that's the Guatemalan Partnership Church. And the question is, with a congregation our size, is it possible to be the Guatemala Partnership build-a-bed gun violence prevention church? Is that too much? It's not really made for an identity. So, or should this particular ministry of our church, this particular ministry, fall by the wayside, and maybe until we grow? And then this practices of vital congregations focus on reimagining or working on reimagining mission practices, and they had a list for this: crossing over experiences, which might take place in visits. Certainly, I would say for some of us, watching and feeling like we were there, Ramiro's 2 days of memorial activities, starting with a heartfelt little vesper in his living room that we got to watch in living color and live and really high quality video and audio where we felt like we were there. And then the march to the Arca de Noe Church, the service there, and then marching to the cemetery, the city cemetery in Estor. And that felt like a crossover experience to me. I've also heard reports of on one of our recent visits when one of our youth got pretty sick, and besides getting a visit from the doctor in her hotel room with a number of us there, she got a visit from some of the female leaders in the presbytery who we'd been meeting with, and they said a sort of Pentecostal style prayer, and that was really quite an experience too. So, so think about that. He talked about they talked about joint testimony, coming together in small groups or in even in online or large settings to talk about how God has been working in our lives. In a way, maybe the men's group confidential uh, small group thing was a bit of a bit of a couple of these things: the joint testimony and the crossing over experiences. Prayer, including public prayer. This is something we've done, but it might mean more to our folks if we knew more about who and what we were praying for, and more recent insight and information about them. Joint campaigns for sustainable development and justice, and this is part of what the whole book is about. And our partners have sort of steered us away from things like uh, working with them to campaign against the nickel mine in different things that it does, or bringing water projects or whatever else. So we'd have to think about this. I don't know that I think it has to totally come from the presbytery, as the book sometimes suggests, but it's got to be something that lots of folks are on board on, and certainly folks from both sides. And in this case, it'd have to have an official endorsement from the presbytery too. And then intercultural Bible study. Again, this could be in person, and we have done this some particularly in our visits there. And then this could be the shared parallel Bible study that we try to do partly through our Spanish language Bible class. Okay, then a second list, and then I'll be pretty much done, is the healthy twinning relationships checklist. And they talked about parish relationships, but I think they seem to have in mind relationships like ours between Crescent Hill and the Estor Presbytery. And so some of the things on the list are activities to help groups know each other, and maybe even better since we know each other some. So um, whether that's getting to know each other's individuals, whether that's getting to know each other's culture and language and theology and spiritual practices, we might think about ways to do that. It could be informally with our ad hoc video chats. It could be congregation wide. It could be study groups, something like that. Then mutual structures, and we have a Guatemala connection, and they have a couple people who are designated as sort of the committee people. That would be Pastor Benjamin Sakul at Familia de Noe and Pastor Raul Contreras at Altar de Noe. Mutual structures, broad-based involvement from both sides. This is tough to do without visits, but yeah, a visit. If we visit them, we're connecting with a lot of people there. If they visit us, we're a lot of people at Crescent Hill are connecting with them. And then there's other ways to do it, but that's certainly a tough one. Projects, talked about that. Don't necessarily have to be building projects. And I suppose they could even be Bible study projects, but that's something that these folks have in mind. Multifaceted education of a communication with congregation, or in their case, with their presbytery. So this goes back to broad involvement from both sides. Accountability. We really trusted Ramiro with money. And then we went back to sending them money to their bank account. Haven't heard a lot about what they did with it, but accountability in a variety of ways. Maybe we're not keeping up with our end of the bargain in different ways, and so that's important too. And then regular evaluation, including of mission and goals. So it used to be that periodically we set where we're going to do this partnership for another 3 years, and then we're going to evaluate it. And we had a whole retreat of some folks of the presbytery and some folks from our church in Cabana in 2010, which was all thinking about partnership and what we wanted to do. But then eventually they said, well, we're going to keep doing this. The idea that this was a 3-year thing seemed to make folks over there nervous, and they didn't really understand, why we can't just say we're going to have a partnership, for as long as we can do it. And so that this sort of regular evaluation kind of fell off. And in a way, that's what we're doing here on our end, at least.